Years now.
I think we'd like to call the meeting to order.
Thank you.
So the first thing we need to do is, I don't know if you need to do a remote participation script too.
No, because we don't have 7, so no.
Okay, but for the EQAC side, we need to do a remote participation script. And so this month, Ken has volunteered to handle that. So I'm going to turn the microphone over to Ken.
I feel like the guy who on Major League Baseball says any reproduction of this game without the. Anyway, I'll go through it fast. Virginia law authorizes the remote participation of members of any public body, provided that a policy exists to ensure that such remote participation is consistently administered. Any such remote attendance must be approved by the public body as long as, 1, a physical quorum of the board is actually present, which I note they are. It comports with the policy, it will, and the voice of the remote participant is able to be heard by everyone in the room. We have one member who has requested to attend today's meeting remotely. In just a few moments, I'll ask that member to state their location and reason for participating remotely for the rest of the EQAC meeting. Following, EQAC will make a motion verifying that each remote participant's voice is clear, audible, and an appropriate volume for the meeting room, and that each member's remote participation comports with EQAC's remote participation policy. Council member Gruppen, please state for the record your location and why you are participating remotely. Ken?
Your microphone.
Can't hear you, you're muted.
Oh.
You're good now.
Oh, number 1.
Can you hear me now?
We can
Can
hear
you
you.
hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Oh, good. I'm in Herndon and I'm participating remotely for medical reasons.
Okay, thank you. Do I hear a motion that Mr. Gruben's member's voice may be adequately heard and that the remote participation comports with our remote policy?
So moved.
So move, Larry, and who's doing it? Rich. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Larry, your meeting.
So I was thinking it might be a good idea just to go around the table and do introductions.
Sure.
So unless you have a different thought.
Nope, that works for me.
So Linwood, you want to start?
Okay, I'm Linwood Form, and I represent the Mount Vernon Magisterial District on the Park Commission.
I'm Brian Campbell. I represent Braddock District, EQAC.
Renee Greeby, I'm an at-large member, live in Franconia District.
Stella Cook, I'm an at-large member and I live in the Drainsville District. Took me a second.
I'm Macklin, I represent Drainsville on the Park Board.
Ken Lamphere, Vice Chair. I am from the Hunter Mill District.
Larry Zaragoza, I'm chair, and I'm from the Mount Vernon District.
Kyle Stone, I'm chair of the Park Authority Board, and I'm from the Braddock District. Ken, before you go, Jonah and Abena, you guys want to introduce yourself? We do have 2 members joining, Park Board members joining remotely. I know they can't participate, but Allison, are they allowed to say hello?
They
Okay.
can be introduced.
So guys, go ahead.
Sure. Hi, I'm Abena Edu-Houghton. I'm participating from my home in Franconia District.
Hello, Jonah Toomey. I am an at-large member of the Park Board, and I'm participating from my home in the Drainsville District.
Thank you, guys. Ken.
Ken Quincy, Providence District, representing one of Park Authority.
Ron Kendall, Park Authority Board, Mason District.
Rick Healy, EQAC,
Rich Weissman, I'm EQAC, Sully District.
And I'm Maggie Godbold, Park Authority, Sully District.
We're the EQAC groupies from the Office of Environmental and Energy Coordination.
You don't get groupies.
They're right there.
Haley Law with Office of Environmental Energy Coordination.
Kelly Zitzer, groupie number 3.
Sarah Jarella, groupie number 4.
Okay, thank you.
And we just had John.
John Gannon, EQAC, representing Franconia District.
Thank you. Okay, so I believe the agenda is largely for you, for your presentation, so we will look forward to that. Here's Mike. I'll pass that.
All right, Jay, take it away.
All right, everyone. My name is Jay Cole. I'm the Executive Director of the Park Authority. I live in the Hunter Mill District. I think that's what we're doing here. Can we make it a little bigger? Yeah, we go. Okay, next slide. So we're gonna have a bit of a packed agenda. Feel free to ask us questions, or we can wait at the end for questions. We'll kind of pause at the end of each sort of section. But I'm gonna kick off and talk about our equity work, and then we're gonna have a quick budget update. We're gonna talk about trash and recycling, forestry, our reorg to add a new division, where we're going with natural resources and trails. Next slide. So the reason why we wanted to, if you've been following, if you're a Park Authority groupie and are following sort of what we are doing, you'll know that this is a really big initiative that we have to look at our revenue fund and how it is or is not equitable across the county. It is not. So the reason why we're talking about this is it kind of focuses on why, if you look at where we're going, why the focus for the next couple of years is going to be on this and how it does impact everything that Parks does, from natural resource management to management of our rec centers to everything. It's in everything. So next slide. So, and you'll get a copy of this. This is way too small to read, so I'm not going to try to read it. But when we started off doing this, it was important that we sort of talk about the history of the county and how FCPA was created and how NCS, Neighborhood and Community Services, was created. Long story short, the authority was created in the 1950s by the Park Authority Act, and it progressed into acquiring, large areas, Riverbend, and other large park areas. At the time, the 1967 is when Brown versus Board of Education, 1970, Brown versus Board of Education, the county, and I explain this in a way of not shying away from it because this is not an expose. This is not anybody who exists right now did this, but the county took the county 14 to 15 years to desegregate after Brown versus Board of Education. So the county fought it for a while. So that's just putting it in context of what was happening in the 60s, in the late 60s. So when they finally desegregated, a lot of the colored schools were community hubs. And so the people surrounding those schools that were the black schools, when the black students segregated into the rest of the student body, those were community hubs. And so the county, they pressured the county, rightfully so, to create community centers. So they turned a lot of those colored schools that were the black segregated schools into community centers. That's where the first community centers came from, or those previously segregated schools. And so the focus for those community centers was on community getting together, job training, things that you would need if you're sort of in 1969 and are a minority. So community center, NCS kind of, and they were called something different then, they kind of evolved, and FCPA evolved as well. Next slide. And so in the late 60s, early 70s, it was decided that, early 70s, it was decided as the Park Authority was acquiring property and things were happening. It's interesting to note for the Hunters Mill folks here, Lake Fairfax was privately owned. It was run as a park system, and they were sued because they turned away a black family from going there. They sued in the federal courts and they won. And so that was in 1960. It's on there, 60. I can't see.
It was in the 60s?
It was in the 60s. And so 60s. And so in 66, is that what it says?
66.
66. And then we acquired Lake Fairfax the next year, obviously not to continue the segregation of the park, but the Motts were the family that was turned away, and they subsequently donated what became the Motts Community Center because they were turned away from Lake Fairfax. It's important to note, not us Lake Fairfax, but the private entity Lake Fairfax. So in the early 70s, the county decided that they wanted to add swimming to the repertoire of the athletic programs in schools. And instead of adding pools like in Arlington, having pools in the high schools, they didn't want them to only be used for a couple hours. They wanted them to be community amenities. And so they decided to build rec centers basically around pools. So let's create 9 rec centers. And they put an enormous amount of financial backing behind that. And in 5 years, we built 5 rec centers, which is crazy. And so that's crazy and it's great. And the county invested all of that money. And part of the tagline for investing in 5 rec centers in 5 years, I think it was 6 years, in 6 years was, don't worry, this is the only tax dollars it'll ever have to go. They'll run themselves. Which is what you did in the 80s. It was about making government work for you. So, which was great for the community. We got 5 brand new rec centers. Now we have 5 that are all 45 years old and in need of renovation, and we can't renovate all 5 in one CIP cycle. So that's kind of how the rec centers evolved and our revenue fund evolved. And it's important to note that decisions on where amenities like that went in the late 60s, early 70s probably doesn't necessarily work for our population. Now, a lot of our rec centers are not close to public transportation and they're not really all that accessible other than via car. Next slide. So since then, the revenue fund started and that was fine. We had our indirect and our direct costs. We had a lot of financial struggles, the county in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. We had recessions and the county went through, as all across the country, went through some financial straits. So in order to save jobs, which was the right thing to do through those recessions in the 90s, early 2000s, late teens, 2012, positions where if you touched the revenue fund, you were moved into the revenue fund because the county was cutting and slashing jobs because we were in a recession. And so what ended up happening was that's what you did to save jobs. Then it's hard to like reverse back after it's done. So they just sort of stayed. So the revenue fund continued to get larger and larger, and you'll see what the impact of that. So that's kind of the history. It's just good to have. So it's very clear that this wasn't just decided on. It was just organically the way it happened that starts all the way in the 50s. Next slide. So what's happened now is where the community centers started, which were the Mott centers and those schools in really equity areas and Black and brown communities, to filling that need. Back in the day, recreation was considered to be for those people. Let's get those kids off the street. Let's get them in the basketball courts. Let's do that. Now rec is for everybody. Everybody loves recreation. And so there's a gap. So as our revenue fund has gotten bigger and bigger and more expensive, there's been this gap in providing recreational services. And who's been stepping in to fill those gaps? Libraries, free yoga and Zumba classes in libraries, and NCS in community centers. We're now building community centers in communities that aren't what traditionally had community centers, because people really want to be able to get in there for free. They want to be able to play basketball for free. So the Sully Community Center is an example. The Providence Community Center, those are not centers that are in those areas of need. It's those communities advocated for proper dollars in order to be able to have free amenities, which is begs the question of what's really the role of its Fairfax County Park Authority providing rec for everybody or just for certain people. So next slide, we'll get into that. So what we did was we hired a consultant, HR&A, and they came in, and they're not a park and rec consultant, they're a financial consultant. So they deal with dollars and cents, which we thought was very important when you're talking about the revenue fund. It is a business. I say I run a public park system and a private recreational system. My technical title is I am the executive director / CEO of the Park Authority. That's my actual title. Sarah's title is the Deputy Director / COO, because we run a $60 million business. And so we brought HR&A in to analyze our revenue fund and see how we can make it more equitable. Next slide. We're going to go through this pretty quick. This is a hard one to read, but if you go back and look at a slide, this one should be the one. Really, if you look at the left bars on the bottom, we talk about the population of the county. We're a majority minority county, so 49% white. But when you look across our lines of business, we are about, I can't read the numbers. Do you have them? Oh, thank you. Put my glasses on. 68% of our classes are white, 69% of summer camp, 79% of rec center members are white and 82% of golfers. And when we look at the same thing for the county in terms of people who make over $150,000 to people who make, that's the top graph, 40% of our population makes over $150,000 a year, and yet 71% of our summer camp users make over $150,000 a year, 52% of our golfers. So it's stark when we look at all of the differences, and what we're striving for is to make our users reflect the demographics more of the county. Thank you, sir. Okay, next slide. So the way most park systems do it is they use a cost recovery pyramid, and that's on the right. It's Arlington County's cost recovery pyramid, and basically what it does is it looks at individual benefit versus community benefit. So if you look at that pyramid, the bottom would be parks, a trail, a playground, right? That's high community benefit, should be free, that's where that is. The very, very top of the pyramid might be personal training. Very high individual benefit, good to offer people, but not necessarily something that really, if it went away, our park system would fall. Next slide. So part of the reason why our costs are where they are, and we'll get to our costs are really high, is because this is our revenue fund expenses for FY23. The blue is our direct cost. So when you go to any other park system, you say, oh, what's your cost recovery? We have an 80% cost recovery. That's of the blue. That's the direct cost. That's how much it costs to do everything. The red, which is 20.1 million, is our indirect costs. And I refer you back to when we were talking about during recessions and moving people from the general fund over to the revenue fund. If it touches it, it's in the revenue fund. So we're talking the light bulbs, the electricity, HR, the graphic designers, everything. 21 million has nothing to do with actually providing camps or the chlorine in the pool. All the money that it costs to say the county has a recreation department is the red. The red I always describe as during COVID when we were closed, that's how much it cost us just to still exist. We still had to turn the power on. We still had to maintain the pool. We still had to pay staff. That's the 21 million. So when you take the whole thing together, we have to recover every single penny of that entire circle. So when we have MRA increases, which is staff, COLA, cost of living increases, it goes something like this. We got a 4% MRA raise. We're like, yay, that's great for our staff. And then they're like, oh, because we have to recover that from the revenue fund. So last year when we had a 4% increase, it was about $2.5 million hit to our revenue fund. So we had to recover $2.5 million in fees. We had to increase our fees to cover the $2.5 million more that it costs with our staffing. Next slide. So across the country, the general national cost recovery trends is about 25%. That's the average. It's about 25% cost recovery. We're at 60% cost recovery of our entire budget, and CS is at 30%. Now, I stop here and say there is a benefit to having what it is that we have up till this point, not moving forward, but up until this point, because it has enabled us, because we're a business, to create a world-class recreation system. You go anywhere else, they don't have a water mine, they don't have rec centers that look like ours, it's great. So in saying that, I don't think that it's, it's feasible to say, let's go down to 25%, because there's so many offerings that we have. Our fitness centers is different than Montgomery County. They have a fitness area. We have a fitness floor, right? It's different in general, but 60% is too high. Keep on, next slide. Okay, so in essence, what the consultants came back with is we need a four-pronged approach to fixing the model that we have. What's important to note that people don't understand is because we are a revenue fund, we don't have a sliding fee scale. Our fees are our fees for every single person, because it doesn't matter. You can be non-resident, resident, money off, discounts for being a resident or a senior or whatever it is, that comes with tax dollars. So I can discount it because I'll just get the money in tax dollars. There's no tax dollars to go into our revenue fund. So you could be from Mars. It doesn't matter. You're a customer is a customer is a customer. And so first thing is we have to, well, not first thing, one of the things that we need to do is create some sort of a sliding fee scale program so that there are discounts for people who don't make over $150,000 a year, like most other programs in the county. So that sliding fee scale has to be tied into county dollar funds. The next thing, or another thing, is the community benefits pyramid. We need to be putting all of our activities right now, every single thing that we offer in the revenue fund is at the top tier, because it's 100% cost recovery. We need to shift some things down. There's a difference between a private swim class should be higher, but like learn to swim is a life skill, and the #1 cause of drowning in Black and brown populations of children, unintentional, is drowning. So that needs to be more affordable. So every kid in the county needs to be able to learn how to swim. So we need to basically bring our costs for those things not at the top of the pyramid down. And then flexible vouchers, because everything on our pyramid that we're proposing shouldn't necessarily have a sliding fee scale. So those things in the high individual benefit, I'm just throwing some options out, like golf, yoga, picnic shelter rentals, those things wouldn't necessarily have a sliding fee scale, but we don't want to tell people that because you don't make X amount of dollars, you can never go play golf or you can never rent a picnic pavilion. So the way different counties do that is depending on where your income is, you get what's called a flexible voucher. And that's a determined amount of money, $300 for a household. You can do whatever you want with that. You want to spend the $300 playing golf? You want to spend the $300 a picnic shelter? You want to go to the water mine? It allows people to still be able to take advantage of the programs and services that we have that, quite frankly, their tax dollars paid for us to construct. But also keeps our fees manageable, because if we had everything on a sliding fee scale, there's no way that we could control how many people come in with golf. It would be crazy. And then the last thing, none of this is possible without administrative and outreach. So right now, because we have one fee, we have one registration, we have one everything, there's one point of entry. In order to verify incomes from all of the residents who come in, we can't just lower our fees and then expect that demographic to shift on its own. We got to go out and tell people. We have to go out and work with people. We did a pilot at Sully. We opened Sully Community Center, and we have a basketball court next to an NCS basketball court where we're like, okay, we're going to go get them. We're going to go to those communities. We're going to set aside registration spots and work with NCS to fill them with kids that are the most in need. And then we're going to bring them to the center. That all takes time and money. And so that administration and outreach is utmost importance to make sure that there are people verifying income. There are people going out there and telling the communities of all the services they now qualify for. So all in all, next slide, I think, maybe. So the HRNA's proposal to get down to 25% cost recovery was going to cost about $13.4 million. Next slide. Sorry, $32.4 million. That's not what that said. What we did is we had to start somewhere, and we're in the middle of doing extensive community outreach. And so what we did was we took the first shot at putting all of our offerings within the pyramid where we kind of think they should fall, just so that the community can have something to react to. So this is the first opening salvo. Does this look about right for the stuff in the high individual? Does this look about right in the mostly individual? What do you value the most? Because another thing is we got to figure out where to start. And so that's what this is. This is our proposal for where things could start happening, so have people can react to. Next slide. So the initial step for modifying the pyramid with what we propose is about $9.4 million. Next slide. And then for the sliding fee scale and flexible vouchers, we estimate, next slide, that to be about $7 million for the sliding fee scale. Next slide. And then for the annual vouchers, we estimate at about $3 million. Next slide. And then for the administration and outreach, it's about $7.2 million. So all in all, next slide. It's about $26.6 million is where we're starting off with right now. We presented that to we did that too, to the Board of Supervisors. We made it very clear that we're not, if they handed me $26.6 million right now, I couldn't fix it all in 3 months. We didn't get here in a day. It's going to take more than a day to get out of it. Honestly, the most uninteresting part, the administration is the most, we got to build a house first. We got to build a new system. We got to build the house. We have to have outreach, and then we can move into to other areas and figuring out where do we start. Do we start with a sliding fee scale program? Do we start with lowering certain fees? Do we start with the flexible vouchers? You know, we're doing an extensive community outreach right now with NCS to see what it is with not only our users, but people who are not our users right now. What's your barrier to coming? Is it transportation? Is it distance? Are we not offering things that you're interested in? All of those things are on the table. Next slide. And so the consultants also talked about funding. There are a lot of different funding options that exist around the country. So they talked about things like dedicated park and rec tax, property tax levies, and other things, because we all know if you watch the board budget this year, you know, the general fund can't hold everything that we're trying to, you know, hold right now. It's just not sustainable. So we got to figure out other ways that we can fund this. Next slide. And again, the whole goal of this study, the left bar is our county demographics, and the right is our program participation demographics. The entire goal is to get that right side looking much more close to the left side. So we want to be actually serving all of the residents of the county, like our mission states, not just the ones who can afford it. Next slide. So next steps, we said this was not a budget ask. We made it very clear. There's some budget guidance that went into the budget this year to continue to work on how to start this process. We are in the middle of our intensive inclusive public outreach with NCS, which is a multi-pronged approach that starts now. This is an old slide. It's going through the summer. We're collecting comments from public access across the county, the BOS, Park Authority Board. We're not doing the standard outreach again. This is not the throw out a comment card and send it back. We are asking targeted questions in a close to a statistically significant study and asking questions, and we're looking at the demographics of who answers the questions, and then we're going out and we're going to be doing targeted outreach to make sure that we're talking to the same demographic of both economic and racial and age and everything breakdown of the county. We want to make sure that we have a really good sample size so we really know what the public thinks. And then we're working with DMB and the BOS and the Park Authority Board, and we're hoping to return in the fall with some sort of a strategy moving forward. So the reason why we talked about this, we're getting the budget update next. The reason why we wanted to make sure that we talked about this in EQAC is I have conversations a lot of times with people who, you know, why don't you do this wetland project or this forestation? Well, I would love to, or this playground. We all have our priorities in the playground, and you know me, obviously equity is my thing, and playgrounds are really important, and we can be planning to do a playground, and then the geothermal will fail at Laurel Hill, which is our highest money-making golf. And guess where the money is going? Fixing the geothermal at Laurel Hill. We cannot make decisions based on the what's best for the park system or what's most needed by the community, because if the revenue fund falls, we're sunk. There's no safety net. It is a business, 100% with the fiduciary responsibility. There's no county umbrella. We gotta make the money back, and so it really is in everything, and it hinders all decisions when we're talking about what we're gonna do and not gonna do. That's it. Budget update. Are you doing budget update? I'm doing budget update. Sorry. Go ahead. Oh yeah. Do you have any questions? Sorry, that was heavy. Yes.
So I have a question, because it seems like, and I'm just asking because I don't know. It seems like there's an assumption that if you have a certain amount of income, you use a certain amount of recreational things, and that shifts by income. Is that true? I mean, is it true that if you have X amount more income, you're always going to do this, this, and this versus someone who has less? I don't know.
No, so I'm going to answer it in two parts. I kind of understand, and I'm going to start answering and tell me if I'm not going left and you want me to go right. So camps, because we're at 100% cost recovery, we did a whole thing where we're looking at our camp costs. And I tell this story because it's like the hair club for men. I'm not only the park executive director, I'm also a user. I got two kids, 8 and 11. Mm-hmm. And sign my kids up for camps. And I'm just picking the stuff and whatever it is. And I finish and I do the calculator, and I actually walked out of my office and looked at my husband and said, how much do you think for 2 kids for the summer? And not like all specialty camps. It's like $6,000.
How much?
$6,000. And so it's a chunk. And because of the way that it's $6,000 at one time, it's $6,000 in January, a month after Christmas, that you
Right.
Okay, so the sum of the costs are prohibitive for income because it's not affordable.
And so, I mean, so I don't like golf.
Mhm.
So I could have $6 million
Mhm.
and I still wouldn't want to play golf,
Sure.
which is, you know, so maybe some things, I mean, I don't think everyone loves golf. The camp thing I get,
Mhm.
you know, and so maybe it's, you know what I'm saying? It's different for different.
Say it again?
The survey that we're asking is,
You know what I'm
why,
saying.
why are you not using our service? Is it because you don't like golf, or is it
That would
because
be-
of, right, or is it because it's too expensive for you to play?
Right.
And so
It
that
would
will
be
be.
interesting to see the end result of that, to see, because I can see with some things the camp makes perfect sense to me.
Sure.
Everybody who has a kid probably wants their kid in camp. Not everybody wants to go.
No, absolutely, and golf, and that's why the pyramid exists, because if you know, there are certain, in the administrative and the outreach. Lowering golf fees is not gonna change the demographics of golf. The people who exist and play golf right now will just play for less money. In order to increase the demographics of golf, it's gonna take other stuff, bringing people in and introducing them to the sport and having camps and getting into the, like, that's a different thing. So each one is gonna have a different strategy for trying to.
And I didn't say I hate it, I just, every time I went out and tried.
I don't, see, Ryan, is Ryan here?
No.
No, it's fine, it's fine.
I was
We'll
gonna say,
take
can
it
I
out.
tag off with that? Not everybody has kids, so,
Yes.
but.
And I hate camp.
No,
No,
but I mean
but
about.
you know what I'm
three-quarters
asking
of the
about
population,
tying
households have kids.
Yeah, tying the amount of money you make to some of these questions seems weird to me. The camp thing, no, I get the camp thing. I don't get the golf thing, I don't get the other things.
And it's all together. So the other thing that people a lot of times don't understand is the revenue fund is all one thing. It's not each individual thing has to be in the black or the red. So there was a time when the rec center memberships were holding us afloat and golf was kind of on the decline. COVID happened and now golf is booming and rec centers are slowly trying to get to where they're supposed to be. It's a cumulative thing. So it's not there are things that break even or don't make as much money, but then things like golf and camps have to make up for that because it's one fund all together.
I love the idea
Yeah.
of golf paying for camp, I think it's great.
You may find some people don't agree with it.
The message here, I mean, the chart you referred to is the most important, is that there's a great imbalance between use of the recreational facilities and the county demographics.
Correct.
Now, gotta correct, it's the right thing to do. But how do you do that without making it a zero-sum game? Decreasing from golf to, I don't know how you, it would seem that making it a win-win would be increasing the recreational facilities in general and not decreasing too many.
Oh, so we're trying to, that 27 million is hopefully tax dollars or hopefully coming from the county. The idea is that we take some of that $21 million of indirect costs that we have, we move it, and this is getting more complicated, we move it into the general fund where it should be. And then we take that savings and now the rec centers don't have to recoup so much money because that $21 million doesn't have to be recouped. So now we can lower rec center fees. And that we don't have to increase other thing. We're just going to lower that because now our target is $20 million less.
Right.
So
getting the increase in participation.
That could happen, yes.
Rather than telling some groups you can't participate as much.
And that, yes, and that's
politically doesn't sound very promising.
Yes, and that's the balance that happens in business that we can't really factor in. Right now, we're going to factor in how much we would not lose, but how much less revenue we would get by lowering the fees. In reality, when we make something more affordable, you might increase the amount of people who come. That might offset the two, but we can't promise that because then we wouldn't like, oh, just lower the fee and they'll come. Well, I can't tell you that they are going to come or not going to come, but it might sort of balance those things out.
This point's a real good one, though. It's like we're operating at capacity right now, and to stimulate one group to get them to participate more is going to mean that you're going to have to disincentivize another group and take opportunity away from them. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, if your point is raise everything and try to pull up the group that you're trying to attract.
Everything's operating at capacity?
No, rec center, go ahead.
We have
Even
Well, the camps are certainly at capacity.
Camps Camps are almost at, with the, camps are capacity, and you.
Water mines at capacity.
Sarah's looking at me like, what are you about to say? Sorry.
So rec centers, we have a lot of capacity to bring in more people. You know, we're, especially during the day, there's a lot of time where our rec centers have plenty of time, especially within our fitness centers. Our camps last summer, by the end of the summer, we filled probably about 85 to 90% of the slots. So camps are close to capacity. Our biggest challenge with camps is we need more space. If we had more space, we would be able to offer, you know, hundreds more camps. It's just about we're at capacity with what we have with our facilities and use of the schools. Golf, you know, we're not at capacity there. However, we are a heck of a lot better than we were pre-COVID, but there's still capacity within golf as well. So there is capacity, especially within our rec centers, to bring in more people, and we would love to see that.
Let me say, I think you made a very good point, which I did not completely understand. How Fairfax is providing a really high level of recreational opportunity. And you can't directly compare it to counties that are providing a more basic level of
You can compare it to some. Go ahead. Do you want? Were you making this? You can. So there's a lot of play in the news about the decision that Montgomery County Recreation did to make fitness free. And so I heard about it, a lot of emails like Montgomery County made fitness free. Montgomery County's fitness area is literally, if you cut off at the table over there with like 30-year-old equipment that's been donated. That's not like a fitness room that you go into a rec center. It's just different. So they have their rec centers read more like a community center here. And they have a couple of regional, like 2 regional rec centers that are meant countywide that are more the size of our normal rec centers. So it's comparing the apples to apples is a little bit, is different in a lot of respects. So we do have, you know, our rec, I mean, we run it, like we run a really great, I mean, when I say we're a business, it's not saying that we're struggling. We're a $60 million business that is a really strong $60 million business. And what we're saying is, are we serving the clients that really need the services?
Okay. First off, I think this was a great presentation, well explained. I think I followed you kind of on the $300 voucher thing, but at the end, one of your last statements, you made a comment or in question, answer to somebody's question about lowering the fees. And we've seen that in housing. You lower the price of housing, it just gets backfilled by the people who have the money anyway. You raise the price, it gets filled by the people who have the money. How do you secure that, wherever that price is, that and is that what the $300 voucher type thing might be, to give them an opportunity? I mean, I know that was just an example, but because I'm sitting here listening that we have the same problem with housing. If you lower the price, it gets backfilled by those who have the money. If you raise the price, then people who have the money. So how do you secure?
So those are 2 different answers, I think. So the voucher program is so that we can sort of separate things that go into the sliding fee scale. So the idea isn't that everything is a sliding fee scale of you only pay 20% if you make X amount of dollars, because it just can't exist that way. So but we don't also want to tell people you can't golf or get a picnic shelf. Or go to the water mine. What you're asking really falls into that $7 million administrative outreach thing. It's not about just lowering fees and then just putting park takes out and letting people register, right? It's about, okay, we've got these 17 camps. Let's hold back 10 of the spots, work with Lloyd and NCS and say, we've got 10 spots in this camp, fill them with whoever you want. I have a rules of work, and one of them is respect the lanes of others. It's not my lane. I respect what NCS does. It's not my job to identify kids in need, because sometimes kids in need might not be the lowest of income. Maybe they're like on the cusp of something. Fill them with the kids that most need this thing. And so in that respect, then we open up the other 12 to the general population, and we have 10 that come in, because you've also heard of diversity and equity. It helps everybody. It's beneficial to all kids to be mixed with people of different, backgrounds. So that's why it's so important. We can't just open it up and lower the price and then expect those demographics to change. We have to engineer it.
Right. Yeah, I see.
If I could offer one little comment, and this is not something I'm an expert at all, but in the water, electrical, and utility world, the electrical utilities have kind of taken the lead, and they have a program for identifying community, households that need some supplemental support for their electrical bill. And so they have this system in place for identifying who those people are everywhere. And utilities are allowed to use that in a variety of ways. For the most part, they give some kind of a discount. And it's used by, DC Water uses it. I think some of the gas utilities use it. So you don't have to necessarily create something new, I guess is what I'm saying.
So yes. And so part of this, when we hired the consultant to come out, was again, the same sort of thing of like, not my, like stay, respect the lanes of others. I did not want to walk out and say, hey, NCS, there's an entity that does this, but in that, not backroom, that makes it seem nefarious. But in conversations with NCS, the county, it is very clear that one of the barriers for equity is making a family have to go to 7 places to verify income. That doesn't make any sense. So part of this is how can we do a one verification system? Why wouldn't you just be in my system and somebody else? You got free and reduced lunch. You have what you were talking about, utilities. You have Department of Family Services. You've got, well, there's food stamps. You've got all SNAP. You got all of these ways, and for each one, housing, affordable housing, they have to go. A family has to go and verify with like 17 different times to say I qualify. Why wouldn't we have one county verification?
It's just kind of insulting in a way and
Very.
devastating and degrading to a whole group
Yes.
of people.
Yes.
I mean, that's just plain mean.
Yes.
No offense, it's mean.
And one thing that was very clear from the Board of Supervisors when we presented to them at the end of January was that whatever this ends up looking like at some point in time, there would be one kind of verification system for the county. I mean, board members were pretty adamant about that much. So, I mean, there will be one kind of unified system, whatever it looks like, and whoever controls it, I think is TBD at the moment, but there will be one.
Is there a way to include, I think there's 12 of the emergency relief agencies that are nonprofit, privately run, but the county works with, they're not in the neighborhood community centers. Is there a way to have them into this, because they're working with a
For
lot
the
of,
verification?
well, with it and the whole thing, because they're working with a lot of clientele.
So I think that's where NCS comes in. NCS is like the umbrella, right, for most of those groups. And so when we say we're working with NCS, it's, we're doing they have and I'm going to mess this up completely because this is the stay in your lane type thing, but they have the database of all faith leaders, for instance.
Right.
Who are,
right. Yeah, through the
right.
United Faith, yeah. Thing.
And so when we're reaching out, like that's the NCS's outreach, like saying like, how do we, instead of us trying to recreate the wheel and figure out who are these community leaders and the people, they know who they are already. So yes, we are.
I think somebody had it.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just curious, are you talking about substituting some portion of the 60 million, or are you talking about adding another 20 or 30 million to the budget?
Sure.
No, I would
love both. So
are you asking for an increase to 80 to 90 million, or are you asking for just a substitution and putting some funds in a different way into the 60 million?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on how you look at it. Our revenue fund would shrink. That's what we're asking for, the 26 point whatever million dollars. But from a county outlay, if you're looking at it from the Board of Supervisors perspective, their outlay increases. So the overall picture, the overall budget picture for the Park Authority on net doesn't change. Our revenue fund goes down, the general fund support goes up. But the total stays. Now, obviously, we would like to see an increase over and above that, but at a very base level, that's what we're looking at, is just changing the balance of those scales. But again, if you're looking at it from the county perspective, the general fund outlay is going to increase if this carries forward the way we'd like to see it move forward.
Which is the hardest part about this, is that there's not a tangible, this is where the rubber meets the road when you talk about equity, is what am I getting? You're getting the same exact system, the county. You're getting everything. The people who are winning and getting something are the people who are struggling, are your residents. You're not getting another water mine, you're not getting you're getting the same thing, and they're getting the same thing. They're just struggling, a little less. And it's hard when you're talking about, and everybody doesn't have kids, but like for rec centers, our number one users are seniors, right? Seniors are our number one users. And how many times do you hear about, relief for seniors, in general, and seniors are our number one users of rec centers and camps. you can't really tell based on who uses them or not, because it's my mom with 2 kids, like, I'm gonna move heaven and earth. My kids, he wants to go to Pokemon camp, he's gonna go to Pokemon camp. I'm not gonna eat dinner, but he's gonna, so it's all tied into things of how families struggle, of how they prioritizing, their kids over their own physical health and mental health. So it's a lot. Do you have a question, Renee?
Do Renee and then move on.
Okay.
For extra funding, what state authority do you think you need for additional taxing possibilities?
Oh, I think Kyle would like to answer that question.
I don't want to get you in trouble.
Yeah, that's good. I said to talk. He's like, no.
They're all, I mean, right now, the county has authority to do the meals tax on its own. That was 2-3 years ago. I don't remember when anymore. I don't know, Michael, if you remember. They were given authority to implement that. So that one is an option, and it was something that was discussed by the board during their many budget deliberations. And then there's, one that I've been bringing up in front of the board the last couple of times I've testified is the transit occupancy tax or the hotel tax. They have some headroom in that to raise that.
But
And
to get to that, the first 1% would need to go back to
correct.
hospitality. The next 1% would go to the
Correct.
general fund. The meals tax would go 100% to the general fund?
It'll go 100% to wherever the county, the board of supervisors decides.
Is there authority to do park-related tax, like the slides had mentioned, the other locales have? Does Virginia have that authority?
Not that I'm aware of. It's certainly not been delegated to the counties.
Is Virginia have to?
Doesn't the
It
meals
is.
tax still need to be approved by referendum? They just
Not
haven't
anymore.
in legislation.
No, they changed that a couple of years ago.
Right.
And I suspect the General Assembly probably wouldn't give the board any more authority until they started using some of the
Yeah, I agree with
taxing
that one.
authority they already have. We're at about halfway through and we've got half of the agenda still to go. So I'm going to suggest we move on to the next item.
Okay, budget update. We did that first on purpose. I get my glasses on. So our 2025 budget, I know that this was a very, if you're following, this was a very tight year. I think that all in all, when you look at the, what was on the table, the Park Authority did fairly well. So we, in a lot of categories, not so well in others. So we got the full funding for the Mobile Nature Center under compliance. We separate our budget into sort of continuing services, which I call operating budget impacts, which is you've passed an ordinance and this is how much it impacts, or we've bought and renovated a new park. This is how much it's now going to cost for maintenance. And then there's sort of new initiatives. The Wonder Wagon would be new initiatives. You're going to hear a little bit from John about compliance. So we have bamboo removal for the bamboo ordinance. And zero waste trash and the recycling. We asked for the zero waste trash and recycling. You're going to get that in a second, 3.9 million. We got $1 million for a pilot to start into, I'm not going to talk about that. Sarah's going to talk about that. And then bamboo, I'm going to skip that because John's going to talk about that. Operating budget impacts our forestry contact. I'm going to skip that because they're going to talk, let me see what there's. Next slide. Most of the stuff we're going to talk about in general. Energy program projects funded, a conversion to gas powered equipment, the phase 2 of that, we got $158,000. Continued support for the UMR program, we got $466,000. Watch the Green Grow, $43,000, and Water Chestnut Mitigation Program, $130,000, for a total of $798,000. Next slide. We all talk about sort of the impact of advocacy. A lot of people around this room and EQAC itself, because you guys have written letters to the board to support Parks' budget. This is sort of the FY23-24 results of that. So FY23 in park maintenance, we had $201,000. 2004 and $177,000. What's PPN?
Patriot Park North.
Oh, Patriot Park North, to finish that up. Forestry in the FY24, $57,000 and $89,000 for Patriot. And the 2025 adopted, I just read through. And we also got $1.8 million in park and field maintenance. Maintenance is one of the biggest issues that we've had and we've been focusing on for the past little bit of time. Okay, I'm going to focus because you're going to talk about trash. So I'm trying to not double up here. Somebody missing something? Okay, next slide. Okay, trash and recycling update. Sarah's going to talk about it.
As Jay mentioned, one of our initiatives this year was to increase funding for park maintenance. We are hearing from the community the need for better maintenance of the parks. Our parks are kind of loved to death and have been since COVID and even prior to that. So one of the areas that we focused on with our 25 requests was implementation of the zero waste and trash and recycling program. As I think we mentioned to you the last time we met, our area crews spend about 2 to 3 days a week right now just removing trash from the parks. So we proposed having a dedicated trash crews who will also do other things other than trash and recycling, who would handle all trash and recycling for that area, which will free up our staff time to focus on other maintenance needs within the park. So fortunately, we were funded for 2 of the areas. I'm not calling this a pilot, I'm calling it phase 1 of implementation, knowing that there will be more phases to come after this. So our 26 request will be to fund implementation for all areas of the park. So we would have trash and recycling at everywhere that we have trash cans now. It's not all 420 parks, but it seems like it some days. So our 26 request will be about 2.8 million, and that will allow us to be in full compliance with the recycling ordinance for the county and to be able to free up our maintenance staff to focus on the maintenance needs throughout the system. The other item that was fortunately funded was forestry. I think when we met a year ago, we talked about our needs in forestry, just like the impacts of trash have on our maintenance crews. Because forestry needs were our priority, because there are a lot of high-risk trees that could impact infrastructure or human life, our forestry needs need to be a priority over all other things. So for the last 10 plus years, we've taken about $2.3 million from our other maintenance needs to fund our forestry operations. Fortunately, next slide, the 25 budget included fully funding forestry. This will allow us to not take funding from other sources and fund all high-risk trees. Our focus moving forward will be on more of preventative maintenance, and that will require additional funding to do that.
Cool. That's it. Next slide. Next slide. Oh, new division. Oh, Julie, okay. I'll pause now for the budget. Do you guys have any questions about the forestry, bamboo, or budget? Yes.
I think it was probably the year you started, when you presented to us, you told us about natural resource management and the funding that we had in the Park Authority versus kind of the national averages, pennies on the dollar. Forestry is one component of that. Where are we on the next steps for that pennies on the dollar?
I think that we're talking a little bit about, right? Your part is talking a little bit more about where we've come.
Yeah, we'll talk about the efforts that you all have supported the past 4 years, as well as some ongoing opportunities for growth within natural resources.
Okay, so and for those of you who work across, well, probably just Renee, works across the river, this might look familiar. So one of the updates that we're making to the Park Authority is that we're adding a new division. The new division is called the Planning and Stewardship Division. And basically what it's going to do is it's going to take the stewardship, next slide. It's going to take the stewardship aspect of our cultural, natural, and cultural resource stewardship. We're going to pair them together with our planning function and land acquisition function so that we're basically elevating our mission. So right now we have 2 different sides, and I'll just take John. I'm going to be very, very brief, hopefully. We'll take John Burke. John Burke is reviewing a project that we're doing or something, and he has to fight across to the Park Development Division engineer, division director, and it's an uneven, thing. And so this is creating a division director for planning and stewardship that John gets to go up to that can, we're not fighting, but you know what I'm saying, who can have a conversation sort of head to head, right? This is a mirror of, and this is what I was referring to Renee crossing the river. This is a mirror of the structure in Montgomery County that I came from. This is actually the division that I ran before I came here, the Park Planning and Stewardship Division. And so it's sort of bringing, and what it also does is it takes the sites, which are the nature centers, lakefront parks. And right now, under the current division, they are under Amy Vosper, Deputy Director, whereas the rec centers and the other sites are under Sarah. And so what this does is that division, what's the new division called? RMI, I'm gonna get it. Resource Management and Interpretation, which is all of our sites and our lakefronts, that's gonna shift over to the operations side and be in the same division with all of the resources they need, like maintenance and the other rec centers, and then pulls planning and stewardship over to the other side. So if you hear, we're hopefully in the hiring that division director fairly soon. Definitely by the next EQAC meeting, you will get to meet this person. But if you hear of this, this is the new. And this was probably the person, definitely the person that you will have, this committee would have the most interaction with. Next slide. So now the resource management, and see, if I just waited, I could have not had to struggle through it. Resource management and interpretation with Laura, that is now, it's gonna have 3 parts here. It'll have the historic sites, remember, sites and interpretation. So all the historic sites, Sully, Colvin, Frying Pan, Gum Springs, with the waterfront sites, 7 waterfront sites and nature centers, and then outreach and education. So that's going to be resource management and interpretation, and that will shift. Whereas before, if you ever needed to talk to Laura's boss, you talk to Amy, now you'll talk to Sarah. Hopefully you never had to. Next slide. Okay.
Thank you. My name is John Burke. I'm the Natural Resources Branch Manager for Fairfax County Park Authority. And I'm going to speak with you all briefly today. In the past, we've talked about all the things Natural Resource Branch is doing, but EQAC has emphasized a desire to talk more about challenges and continuing opportunities for growth for natural resources within Park Authority. I want to first draw your attention to some of the initiatives that we've been building over the past 2 to 3 years now, which you all have supported, and then I'll talk about some of the opportunities for growth in areas that we're focusing on for growing the natural resources management capacity within Park Authority. So the first big program that we've built over the past couple of years is the Landscape Legacy and Sustainability Program. That is a fancy way of saying natural resources maintenance. And what we do with this group is maintain completed terrestrial and wetlands restorations. So you may recall, we've talked about this in the past and you all have supported this initiative. We engage in restoration throughout parkland and focus on protecting rare plants, rare natural communities, and encouraging rare or watch list wildlife species to call Fairfax County home. So we're making these large changes to the landscape, and by doing so, we are creating new areas with native plants, new or modified natural communities. And just like when we construct a building, these areas need maintenance long term. Now, the restoration program is primarily funded through the Park Authority bond, which requires that most of these projects be implemented within a 5-year period. And as many of you all know, if you walk away from these types of projects after 5 years, you'll then have to contend with some challenges further down the road, and you may lose a lot of ground to invasive plants particularly, but also to deer and other challenges. So the Landscape Legacy program is now fully staffed. We have a facility at Lewinsville Park, and we have 3 very talented ecologists, thanks to the support from the BOS, Park Authority Board, EQAC, and others, to make this happen. We've done a good job, I think, of emphasizing the need for this group, recognizing the challenges that we face, and now we're setting out to implement the $750,000 a year in funding to make these improvements. I'm happy to say that this crew has done a great job of not only providing baseline level maintenance for these completed restorations to include invasive plant management, prescribed fire, herbivory controls like deer fence maintenance, but they're also developing a robust monitoring protocol to ensure that as we progress through time, that we're tracking the changes to these restorations and ensuring that the maintenance adjustments and activities that we're making to the landscape are in fact improving the natural community and benefiting the targeted wildlife species that we're trying to attract. It may allow us to shift our management strategies as well, and we'll look to implement this monitoring protocol for all of our completed restorations so that we can track success of these. The restoration program, Helping Our Land Heal, is believe it or not, a relatively new program, 2013 or so, and there are certainly some opportunities to help that grow. So by having a monitoring protocol in place for after construction, if you will, of these restorations is completed, we're able then to take what we've learned from that monitoring protocol, those lessons learned, and apply it to new restorations. Next slide, please. Another initiative that you all have supported and that we've also gotten Park Authority Board and BOS support for is the recognized need for bamboo management in Fairfax County. As many of you all know, running bamboo is one of many invasive plant species that we struggle with here in the county, but it is particularly tough to control and can form dense monocultures that can result in infrastructure damage as well as impacts to the ecology of a park or someone's backyard for that matter. So through the funding from the BOS, we get $400,000 per year now, just in project cost. We also have a full-time staff member now that we're in the process of hiring currently. Interviews completed yesterday, and we have a decision already in place now to hire that person. We will be able to implement that $400,000 broadly throughout Fairfax County, targeting high priority areas that are in high vulnerability district regions, in areas where bamboo might threaten vulnerable natural communities, in areas where bamboo may threaten infrastructure and park facilities, as well as areas that have demonstrated or planned support from, say, the private landowner that the bamboo is encroaching to or from. So we have our first round of bamboo projects selected, our pilot study, if you will, that's going to field proof our methods for control. I'm targeting parks that have nearby natural resource management staff in place so they can keep an eye on these management projects as they proceed. Bamboo typically takes 3 to 5 years to implement, control to implement. So we're looking at a first year swipe of cutting it down and then 3 to 5 years of foliar application of herbicides to really knock it back. My plan is not to control bamboo on parkland, it's to eradicate it when we find it. So you may hear of other folks digging ditches and putting barriers in the ground, but from both an economical perspective and in relation to our natural resource management plan, it makes sense for us to remove it completely. So this is just the first round of projects. This is 150,000. I got the quote back. It's actually closer to 100,000. We'll be doing another field trip with our contractor to get the next list, a phase 2, if you will, of projects on the books. And we're going to keep rolling as we identify more bamboo projects and get support from the homeowners or business owners or what have you who are making these complaints. As they agree to manage it on their property, we'll then work with them to try and handle it on ours. In addition to that, we are, of course, supporting broader initiatives with the BOS to provide outreach to different groups within Fairfax County. Primarily, these requests come from HOAs or environmental advocates. But we want to ensure that the education is out there for those who want to control bamboo on best management practices and how to report it if they have a concern. And for that particular topic, we're working with code compliance. We're also helping to train the code compliance officers to accurately identify bamboo and ensure that we're not going after a native species, for example, and that we're targeting a running bamboo species, a Phylostachys, which will have a higher likelihood of spreading versus a clumping bamboo species. So thank you all for your continued support for that effort. I'm happy to say we are getting underway on it. Next slide, please. So when we're talking about additional opportunities to grow our capacity with regard to natural resources in Fairfax County Park Authority, this will certainly be a familiar topic to many of you all and something that I've talked about before. The IMA program is, from the Natural Resource Branch's perspective, our flagship stewardship and outreach program. So we, as you saw, are funded for around $460,000 a year for this initiative, which includes around 70 invasive plant management sites, as well as contracted herbicide application support for those sites. In addition to that, that funding also covers staff time intern time for mapping invasive plants, as well as our early detection rapid response program for mapping new and emerging invasive plants on parkland. So we have a lot of ground to cover with that program, and $460,000 is excellent. We're really fired up about it. Gloria Medina is the new program manager for that program. She's been with IMA for a long time, and we are currently working on backfilling her position and filling the empty roles within the program, as well as hiring interns, which is going to be happening here in the next month or so. But the concerns with IMA stem from the fact that the program is funded through the Environmental Improvement Program through Fairfax County, which has been funding IMA since its initiation and has been a great source of funding to keep the program running. But there are some restrictions associated with that program. Full-time merit staff cannot be funded through the Environmental Improvement Program, and we have to apply in a competitive process for funding every year to ensure that the IMA program can continue. It's one of the longest running programs as far as natural resource management within the branch, and it's been around since, I believe, 2006. So an opportunity for growth or improvement within the program would build support and additional capacity for merit staff, as well as security associated of having that program be a regular item in the BOS budget. So that's where I would look to take that program in the future. I'll probably keep trying to maintain focus on that initiative, because I think by building additional merit staff within the program and securing that as a regular source of funding from the BOS, we can continue to grow additional sites. We can continue to build more volunteers, and we can also establish more stability within the program when it comes to staff retention. Next slide, please. And then one other opportunity for growth for natural resources, which I have not brought to your all's attention because we have had a number of other priorities that we've discussed over the past 4.5 years, but I would like to address now, is the expansion of the Natural Capital Protection Program. So this is one of the programs within the Natural Resources Branch proper, and this is the program by which the Natural Resource Branch reviews, comments on, and establishes avoidance, protection, and mitigation measures for developments on parklands. That can be like a roadway project. It can be something that is even happening adjacent to parkland that might be or could potentially impact parkland. It could be a request for a right-of-way or an easement. And this program is even responsible for looking at potential encroachments, as well as going out into the field and visiting sites and assessing them for potential acquisition from a natural resources perspective. So when we're looking at a new acquisition, a new parcel, the role of this program is to weigh in on the potential value and benefits of that parcel from a natural resources point of view. When I say program, this program is one person. He is an ecologist 3. He's a very talented ecologist 3. He comes from us from urban forestry, Nick Janaski, and he reviews every single land development review plan set that comes to Park Authority that is either on our property or adjacent to parkland. So to put that in perspective, I believe urban forestry has 4 teams that divide the county up for plan review. And while that is for the entire county, we have 25,000 acres. We have many neighbors who would like to develop, and we have many projects on parkland at any given time, either from a utility or perhaps even one of our projects or trail improvements that we'd like to implement. And it's a lot for one person. So I'd like to build capacity in this program and bring on another ecologist to support the Natural Capital Protection Program and help build capacity to further build the program itself, and in particular, start looking more closely at our options for mitigation standards, because we're beginning to develop a mitigation fund within the program, and applying that mitigation funding responsibly and efficiently will be something that is going to need to have a careful eye on it as well. So those are the 2 major opportunities for growth and expansion and improvement within the Natural Resources Branch. There's also another opportunity that I'd like to discuss. Next slide, please. So we would also like to consider expanding budget for an important part of natural resources, which is not necessarily part of the Natural Resources Branch, but is an important part of our Natural Resource Management Plan and the overall mission of Fairfax County Park Authority. If if we're talking restorations and invasive plant control and inventory work as some of our land management options, we are taking in that information and modifying the landscape or improving the landscape with it. But there's also an important component of Park Authority's mission, which we need to emphasize, and that is stewardship and education. When it comes to natural resources, we are learning a lot more now about what we have on parkland and how to manage it successfully. And we want to continue investing in growing the next generation of ecologists, biologists, Park Authority staff, and folks who have a respect for the landscape here in Fairfax County. So we had requested some additional funding to support our new Woodland Stewardship Education Center there in NRC Lawrence Park, to provide additional outreach and stewardship opportunities, not just for our young students, but for adult students as well, but also to emphasize the benefits of sustainable development of that facility. So as part of that request, which we did not receive funding for this year, but we are going to continue to push for, we're looking for funding for programming staff for that facility, as well as some of the baseline standards for maintenance and landscaping that would be expected for any new development of a facility on parkland. In addition to that, we would also like to expand that request to support for other natural resources staff at our managed sites. In addition to the natural resources branch, we also have natural resource managers that staff sites like Huntley Meadows, Riverbend Park, and others. And those sites also need continued support. So we need to look at, when we're talking about natural resources branch, natural resources initiatives within Park Authority, not just the branch itself, not just the land management strategies, but also the stewardship and education component, which really relays what we've learned about our landscape and helps grow the next generation of environmental professionals. Thank you.
So I was kind of expecting one of the things that you would talk about in terms of growth would be dealing with the invasives issues. Because one of the things we've talked about for probably at least a decade, probably decades, is taking care of what we have. And I go to more meetings than I would like to, that we hear about English ivy killing trees and bamboo that's out of control. And the question is the invasives killing off the natural plants that we have in our parks? And so it seems to me, and I'm looking for you to correct me, that there's a huge unmet need in this area, and it doesn't seem to be reflected in your presentation, and maybe it's somewhere else, I don't know.
There's certainly a huge challenge that we face when it comes to invasive plant management, and that is not unique to Fairfax County, but it certainly is a challenge here. The IMA program, as well as the restoration program I mentioned, and the landscape legacy program, if you were to look at their budgets when it comes to what activities they're engaged in, 2/3 of that is going to be invasive plant management. So our current approach when it comes to our funded programs is to establish anchor points for invasive control and restoration, whether that be a full-on restoration over 60 acres like we have at Elkwood Preserve, or a 1 acre spot in a park, a neighborhood park that I'm a volunteer is helping to clear out. Establish those anchor points and continue to reinvest and expand them. Like you said, though, there are opportunities elsewhere within Park Authority, which we are trying to meet those challenges with volunteer support that are more diffuse, we'll say. So the Tree Rescuers is a good example of a group that's going out there with the support of Park Authority and to meet the need that you're requesting about, specifically vines on trees. They've been a great partner recently to help hit the gaps, if you will, between our anchor points, I'll call them, and the stream valley parks, the neighborhood parks that are encumbered by English ivy, porcelain berry, bittersweet vines like that. There is you could throw money at that problem for years and years and years, and it would continue to be a challenge and something that we would have to defend.
That scares me.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, are there metrics for this? Are you falling behind on invasives? Are we falling way behind?
Yes, everybody is, yes.
Yes, that's why I asked. It seems like we are falling way behind.
Yeah, but for the county to invest money in this, it needs to have a goal and something that it accomplishes. I mean, I love the way you talk about it. I mean, it's really enthusiastic and all, but if I'm going to pay for it as a county resident, I want to know it's going to make a difference.
Sure.
And I can't tell from your presentation if that's the case. I mean, are there 10,000 acres of invasive or 4,000 or I don't know what the right metric would be, but it's kind of hard to support spending money on something just because it's a problem without knowing it's going to actually have a schedule, milestones, an end date. I'm missing that.
So this is future where we're going. This is not in any way what we're putting together for the next budget ask. So with a budget ask, it would be milestones and stuff. But the reality is you give me $1 million a year, you're $7 million short if you want to actually eradicate all non-native invasives. It's just, it's just so daunting and over.
But are you saying that eventually you're going to lose? That really sounds like what you're saying. You're saying you're funding only 10, 15% of what it would take to control invasives. And that means that in 10, 15 years, it won't be a problem anymore. It will just be the nature.
The Park Authority's ability to control. This is coming from private property too. I mean, this is a.
It really depends on, it depends on what, everybody has, I can throw out some, so, because Charlotte, Mecklenburg, I think they're investing $2 million a year specifically on non-native invasive. That is their, like, priority. That's their county council, whatever it's called, priority. It just depends on what, is that the goal for the county is to try to eradicate?
All I've heard is we're going to spend money on this. I mean, I know that may sound really terrible to everybody who just wants to go after invasives, but if you're asking the county for money, I want to know you're going to get there. And if you're not going to get there, if you're just going to fight this for 10 years and then give up, maybe there's a completely different direction to go.
But you're assuming giving up is part of the equation. I mean, I think.
I'm not. I'm assuming that to actually meet something, I need metrics, a goal, money assigned. Not, I just want to go fix this place.
You're talking like an engineer and not a biologist.
That's exactly correct. I'm also talking like a taxpayer.
There's a significant backlog of IMA site leaders that cannot be brought online today because there is not staff to manage them. So there is not only a need in invasives, maybe it's not as measurable as you would like it in terms of how many acreages we have, but look around, it's pretty obvious to see where the invasives are. They're not all in parkland.
But Renee, I'm not hearing any metrics at all.
Maybe right now the best we can do is just keep it from getting a lot worse.
See, thank you. I was going to say.
I don't know that we're doing that.
Given that we're almost out of our meeting time, I'm not sure we have the details.
This is a deep conversation. And when you're talking about non-native invasives, there's multiple different goals, and I can point you to a specific area. You can look at education. Yeah, yes, education. You can look at Justice Park. There are times when you have an overrun of non-native invasives where clearing that does not get you an ecological lift, but it does gain acres of parkland in an urban area. And so that's a benefit to that. There's the ecological, benefit. There's a lot of different things. It's a different strategy as to where you're going. You're asking a very philosophical question about non-native invasives in general as to like, why do we do it and how do you measure the benefits of removing non-natives from a native habitat and what impacts it has to the flora and fauna. I mean, I guess it kind of comes down to its.
I actually heard him asking something slightly different. What I heard him asking is what is the goal? And it's not clear what goal we have for invasives. And it's important, I think, for a lot of people that invasives get addressed. But the fear is, I think, and Clyde made the comment, is he's worried that we're sliding backwards even though we're putting resources into it. And I can't tell if that's the case or not. So that's really the question. And I would love to be supportive of a program that's going to be able to reduce invasives and return environments to a healthier ecological stage and preserve valued trees that are natives, especially. I think that's the intent.
So I just want to say something about, we have some amazing parks in this county. and when I think of a place like Huntley Meadows, so you might spend a lot more money in a place like Huntley Meadows, keeping it as absolutely clean and as good as you can. And you could argue, well, you're not seeing the benefit in terms of numbers of but you're comparing apples and oranges because you have this incredible ecological resource that is worth putting a ton of money into, even though the metrics don't necessarily.
But that's a metric. That's a metric. I want to prioritize and fix just these high priority areas. Here's the budget for that.
I think you're looking at it from the wrong direction. We have a finite amount of budget, $400,000. We do what we can with $400,000. This is not an open-ended budget thing where we have $1.5 million and we're trying to it's $400,000. It's not.
He wants to know that we're not throwing money at something that we're not winning. What he wants to know is, are we? Please let me finish. Please let me finish. And I'd like John to answer this question, right? Are we spending enough money at it and our approach is good enough today that we are moving forward overall big picture for the whole county, or are we still going backwards? And then he, of course, got into the metrics to measure that. But are we going forward? And if we're not going forward, what do we need to do to start moving forward? And how much money does it cost? Is where very close, but also
let me say one thing.
Stella's point. Sometimes
let me say this because we're talking about money. You can't throw enough money at this problem to solve it. It's a manpower problem. It takes people to go out and remove this stuff. And there's not enough money to pay enough people to go do that. The only way to deal with invasives in Fairfax County is to do it with IMA, with volunteers, and you have to organize it on a county-wide level. Now, if we had 50,000 volunteers who wanted for a full year to put every weekend into IMA, we might make a dent. But that's what you're asking. It's the people. You can't pay enough people to go remove these vines.
But that is in the budget ask.
Well, let's let John comment on it. He's been sitting here a long time without comments.
All right.
He's heard the conversation.
Okay, so I think I can hit on some of these questions. I'm going to start with the ones I think that have an answer that I can provide and a solution that I can offer. Metrics, I think, is the first one. I think we have tangible metrics and goals for many of the areas that we're working in.
I think the mic's off.
I think you're right. Out of batteries.
Okay.
All right, I'll just on it. So the natural resource branch tracks invasiveness, if you will, of forested lands on Fairfax County on a rolling basis. It's probably going to take 10, 20 years. We've already had one round where we've done all the forests on parkland. We're in our second round now, going around again. We'll probably be done in a couple of years, and we're going to start again. That's going to be a continuing rolling thing that we have college interns do for us, where we have a set protocol that establishes basically on a rapid bioassessment level. So they're not getting out there and setting transects or setting quadrants, but they're making a quick assessment of the relative invasiveness of a given area. That is a protocol that we apply to our forests, to our restorations where appropriate, and to our IMA sites. The IMA sites, again, are and have been largely dictated by the community interest and support for the volunteers of a given area. That's not always the case. We have, in a few occasions, identified sites that need IMA support, but in order to build a robust IMA and volunteer program, you need to have, in many cases, the local neighborhood support and the local interest in order for those folks to kind of support their local community and feel incentivized to do it. But we have other metrics as well. So that's our tracking protocol. Now, do we have a dollar amount for every vine removed? No. Do we have a dollar amount even for every acre of species removed? Not really, because we're talking about hundreds of species. But our metrics for our restorations are more discrete. So the IMA program, again, community driven as a priority. but also focusing, and in many cases, on high priority areas that we've selected. The restoration program, however, which again is mostly invasive plant management with some replanting, targets the high and has historically targeted the higher quality areas that we can basically keep invasive plants out of, or those areas adjacent to high quality areas that have been denuded or stricken with some sort of disease that's taken out the tree canopy or overwhelmed by invasives to the point where we need to get in there and hit the reset button. One of the metrics that we would shoot for restoration is attracting or providing habitat for certain wildlife. Another metric we would shoot for at other restorations would be to match the natural community, the Virginia identified natural community that we're trying to protect or maintain. So an example for wildlife. At Laurel Hill Park, we are working on a meadow restoration that was all invasive plants. We cleared it out and we're reestablishing a native meadow because we're trying to support the grasshopper sparrow, which needs 60 acres of contiguous meadow to breed. So we are tracking birds in that system responsive to that invasive plant management to establish the breeding habitat for that sparrow. The metric, although it's not as like bean countery as some other metrics, is are we attracting the sparrow or not? And by managing invasive plants, we're providing the habitat, food sources, and breeding areas for that sparrow. That's the example of like a wildlife metric that we shoot for that's measurable. For the natural community metrics that we shoot for restorations, and this can also apply to IMA, is the plant community that has come up in place of invasive plants matching the surrounding or the targeted natural plant community. So diabase forest, for example, at Elk Lake Preserve. Are the trees that we're planting succeeding? Is the understory similar to diabase forest that we considered a contiguous habitat? And are we contributing to that state rare natural community? We go out there and part of the that rapid bioassessment protocol that we've developed to measure natural community, we can then apply to that site and determine if we're successful or not. But both of those examples as a priority involve removing and managing invasive plants in the short and long term. So I think those metrics, we are certainly we can calculate success, and we've seen success when it comes to those targets. When it comes to broader initiatives, you're talking about all of parkland, all invasive plants. Are we winning or losing? It's us and our roughly $2 million budget for the Natural Resources Branch plus other funding for our sites. It's that versus all the forces of industry and globalism that are bringing in plants and species from all around the world. At central hubs here in the Mid-Atlantic coast are being planted in backyards, are being dispersed by wildlife and other vectors like streams. So we are facing an uphill battle. I think we can continue to establish these anchor points, these restorations, these volunteer sites, and if we invest in those, we can defend them. Thank you. But where the bigger challenge lies is, again, everywhere else. And everywhere else is a lot. So from a larger management perspective, one thing that we can continue to educate on is the need to turn off the tap. And that is to, where it can be controlled, reduce the distribution of invasive plants by whatever means that may be, whether that's through the sale of plants or through planting of invasive plants in backyards, making sure that education is broad and that we can make those changes where appropriate. But what I'm trying to avoid with our programs is to go out, strike out at a new site, remove invasive plants because we feel like we should, and then step away from it and then lose all the ground we've made by that investment. So that's where folks like tree rescuers come in, and they can strike out to these other areas and get the high priority invasives out of there by removing vines off trees. That gives us another 5 or 10 years, if we're lucky, of defense from losing our tree canopy. And then when funding and opportunity allows, we can get into those sites and start defending the herbaceous layers, the shrub layers, in addition to the stuff that's going to pull the canopy down.
Hold a second. Does that kind of get to? Thank you. What? Any other questions? I think that there was just trails left, right? Or was there something else left?
Oh, yeah,
think
there's
there
one
was.
little slide on hills.
Just a quick trails update. In general, I'm going to look at it 'cause I can't see. Again, we're trying to make dotted line relationships to all of the things that we're doing and how it, impacts our work in conservation and natural resources management. One of those things is trails. We have, one of the things we did last year is we created a new trail planner position, which is sort of serving as the brain of what to put where. I think that a focus, I know that a focus is going to be on trying to elevate the natural surface trails program, getting people back into nature, and just expanding our trail program in general. Whenever we do our user surveys, trails are always the number one. Natural hard surface trails are number one. So we need to have a little bit more of a method to the madness of how many trails do we need, where do we need them, where are we going, all of those things. We have a new trail planner position. Our trail maintenance budget for 330 miles of trails is $350,000. For reference, it used to be, if you ask me how much it costs for a hard surface trail, I would quote you about $1 million a mile. That's really it's probably about $1.3 million a mile. So the $350,000 that we have for trail maintenance is really pothole fixing. It's going out there and fixing, issues with trails with our maintenance. This year we received $1.4 million in FY23 and $1 million in FY24 from FCDOT's $100 million active transport fund. I will say, as a little bit of a plug, we are spending that money as we get it like this, because we're able to be a lot more agile. Because it's our land, we don't have to get landowner permission, we don't have to deal with the real estate, it's our stuff, so we're just ready to go. So FCP operates approximately 330 miles of trails, 166 miles of asphalt paved trails, 117 miles of natural surface trails, about 51 miles of gravel and stone dust. We have 126 fair weather crossings and 325 bridges. So one of the future projects we're working on is capturing and updating our existing trail signage and wayfinding inventory. And our budget requests $500,000 in FY 2025 budget for trail maintenance. So we're going to be working on having more dedicated funding in FY 2025 for trail maintenance. I will say, I don't know, I think I said last time I was at EQAC, it bears mentioning for those who don't know, I'm a stream ecologist is my background. That's kind of how I came up through. Fish is my specialty. So I have to point out that the 126 fair weather crossings, a lot of them do provide a fish blockage, which is an issue with passing fish upstream, and they all drive me crazy every time that I see them. Forget about the ADA requirements. If I had my druthers, they would all be replaced with bridges. I understand that that's not financially possible in the snap of the fingers with 325 of them, but just know that that's one of the focuses that we have. So that's trails. It's going to be probably one of the 3 focuses for the FY25 budget that we're going to be making, is trying to make some headway with our trails program, continuing with our trash and recycling to finish that up and have the $3 million inequity. God bless. Inequity. Sorry, I can't believe I just forgot that. And making the first headways with equity.
Cool. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This has been very, very helpful. And I do think it might be worthwhile to have some follow-up, I think, on issues like the I believe there's a lot of community support and interest, and I think that trying to figure out a way to find a way to package it to get support might be good, and have a strategy that kind of lays out what our goals are, and to be able to show that they're working. I mean, all the goals you have are great, but I'm thinking this is a great thing, and I think a lot of people could get behind the Park Authority and supporting you for this, because I think it's important work, and it's great to hear about all the other work that you're doing as well. And to understand something about your thinking on the equity study, that was very enlightening.
Good deal.
Anything else?
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Well, you got another meeting too, right?
No, we're all.
We're done.
Okay, you're done.
We're done.
Last week you guys were in our meetings.
Yes.
We had to go to our, this year we're in your.
Yes.
No, we're done.
It was a pleasure seeing you.
And I will follow.
Okay. I'm not sure what the right answer is.
Matter how much money you throw at it.
Layton's got a meeting with us on the issue, and people really want to explore
Still in session.